My name is Nevaeh. I'm sitting in my apartment, looking at the official letter in the fireproof box that cleared my name. It's been a whirlwind, and I still can't believe how everything turned around. It all started when the police cars pulled into my parents' driveway. I was in my mother's garden, trimming the rose bushes she'd asked me to take care of while she and my sister, Luna, were on a weekend trip. The sound of the gravel crunching under the tires, the doors slamming shut, and the radio crackling behind me made my heart sink. Before I could even turn around, I heard Luna's voice, sharp and rehearsed. "She's the one with the problems in this family," she said to the officers, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "You need to talk to her. She's been after our parents' money for ages." I hadn't even stood up from the dirt when an officer asked me to put down the shears and show my hands. My mother stood behind Luna on the porch, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. My father stayed inside, watching through the window like he couldn't bear to be part of what was happening, even though he was the one who called the police. $89,000 had disappeared from the family trust account, the one my great-grandfather had set up decades ago for emergencies and education. My parents had been managing it quietly since he passed. 3 wire transfers over 2 months were all routed through an account with my name on it, according to the bank statement the officer waved in front of me on the lawn. I had no idea what that account was. I'd never opened it. But trying to explain that to the officers with my hands resting near their belts while Luna sobbed into my mother's shoulder and called me a liar was like trying to fight a fire with my bare hands. They cuffed me on the lawn in front of the house where I grew up, in front of the rose bushes I'd been trimming for a mother who wouldn't even look at me. The metal of the handcuffs was cold, and the officer was gentle, almost apologetic, as if he could sense something wasn't right but had to do his job. As they walked me to the car, I caught a glimpse of Luna's face. For a split second, the grief dropped away, and I saw relief. I didn't say a word in the car. When we reached the station, I was silent as they led me past the front desk, past the bulletin board with curling missing persons flyers, and into a small gray room with a metal table bolted to the floor. I sat down, folded my hands, and waited. People who don't know my family think the golden child label is just a metaphor, but it's not. Luna is 3 years older than me, and from as far back as I can remember, she's always been the one who got the benefit of the doubt. When she dented my father's car at 17, it was because the road was slippery. When I forgot to mention SC on my report card, I was hiding something. When she took $50 from my mother's purse at 15 and got caught with it in her pocket, my mother said she must have been planning to pay it back. When I came home 15 minutes past curfew because my bike got a flat tire, I lost my video game privileges for 2 weeks. I used to think it was just bad luck, that some siblings are luckier than others. But over the years, I realized it was a pattern. By the time I was 13, I started keeping things. It wasn't a grand plan at first, it was just a kid's instinct to protect herself when the adults around her kept getting the story wrong. A detective came into the interrogation room a few minutes later. She was a tired-looking woman in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a manila folder under her arm. She sat across from me, introduced herself, and asked if I knew why I was there. I said I did. Then she asked if I had anything to say. I thought about Luna's voice on the lawn, my mother's crossed arms, and my father's face in the window. I thought about every birthday where Luna's gifts were more expensive, every argument where my side was never considered, and all the times over 20 years when my family chose Luna's version of events over the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just looked at the detective and said, "Before we go any further, you need to call my apartment. There's a fireproof box in my closet, and inside it is a folder. I've been keeping it since I was 13. You'll want to see what's in it before anyone signs anything." The detective's pen paused over her notepad. I could hear my mother's voice getting louder down the hall, demanding to know what was taking so long. I sat back in the cold metal chair, and for the first time since the handcuffs were put on me, I felt a bit calm. I knew that 20 years of being the one nobody believed was about to end, and it would end with proof. The detective made the call herself. 20 minutes later, an officer returned from my apartment with the fireproof box. The detective put on a pair of gloves, opened it, and took out a thick folder. The edges were worn soft from 20 years of being hidden under floorboards, taped inside textbooks, and finally locked in a safe when I could afford one. She started with the oldest pages. There was a photocopy of the missing $50 from my mother's purse when I was 10. It wasn't missing, it was behind a photo I'd taken of our cat. In the background, you could see Luna slipping the bills into her pocket. I'd taken the photo by accident while trying to get a good shot of our pet. There was also a pawn shop receipt from when I was 16 for a necklace that was supposed to be lost. I'd found it listed for sale under a name that traced back to an account Luna had opened with a fake ID. And there were screenshots of messages where Luna joked to a friend about how easy it was to get away with things at home because our parents would always believe her over me. The detective read in silence for a long time. Then she got to the recent pages, the ones I'd put together over the last 2 months without telling anyone, not even my boyfriend. There was bank correspondence I'd requested as soon as I noticed a strange login alert on an old account I rarely used. Luna must have known the answers to my security questions since we were teenagers. I'd also built a timeline showing that all 3 wire transfers had been initiated from an IP address tied to Luna. She hadn't thought to scrub the metadata. And there was a voicemail she'd accidentally left on my phone weeks ago, saying she just needed to borrow the money until the inheritance came through and that nobody would notice. The detective closed the folder, looked up at me, and said, "You've done my job for me." By the time my parents were allowed into the station, the story had already changed, but they didn't know it yet. I watched through the small window in the door as my mother demanded answers from the front desk. My father paced back and forth, his hands in his pockets, refusing to sit. When the detective finally brought them back, she didn't bring them to see me. She took them to a separate room and laid the folder open on the table for them to read. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I heard about it later. I heard that my mother went pale when she saw the pawn shop receipt. My father didn't say a word for almost 15 minutes. When the detective explained the IP metadata on the wire transfers, my mother asked in a small, unfamiliar voice if there had been a mistake. There was no mistake, there had just been 20 years of choosing the easy story over the truth. Luna was arrested 2 days later, not on the lawn of our childhood home with a big show, but quietly in the parking lot of her workplace. The charges were more than the $89,000 from the trust. Once the investigators started looking into it, they found 2 other accounts she'd been emptying over the years. She'd convinced our elderly grandfather to let her manage the money before he passed. Nobody had ever questioned it because Luna had always seemed so trustworthy. 3 days after that, my parents called me. My mother cried on the phone for over an hour. It was the kind of crying that comes from finally understanding something you've been ignoring for decades. My father said less, but he showed up at my apartment a week later with a box of my old art projects he'd kept. It meant more than any words could have. I won't say everything is fixed. 20 years of being the unreliable one, the one nobody believed, doesn't just go away because the truth came out. But for the first time in my life, when I tell my parents something, they don't automatically ask Luna for her side. The charges against me were dropped before the week was out, my record was cleared, and I received an official letter in the mail. I keep it in the same fireproof box, next to the folder that changed everything. Sometimes I think about that 13-year-old me, sitting on her bedroom floor, hiding a photo behind a stack of books because some instinct told her she'd need it one day. She didn't know it would take 20 years, but she knew not to throw it away. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to believe them. I learned the hard way that belief is something you have to build, piece by piece, until the truth can't be denied. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been the one nobody believed until the proof was right in front of them, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. There are more stories like mine out there, real and raw, reminding us that the truth always finds its way out. Subscribe now, because the next story might be about you.